Hare Krishna, welcome to the continuation of chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita. We will, as usual, get started with the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Okay, we will resume our discussion on chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita. We covered till verse number 18.7, so the seventh verse. So just to recap very quickly, if you remember, last time we recited two verses over and over again. We won't do that again today. And those two verses were 18.65 and 66, which are the essence of the 18th chapter. In fact, they are the essence of the entire Bhagavad Gita, or well, there's a slight difference. We can say essence or the most important instruction. Essence might mean it includes or packs everything in a compact way, all the instructions in essence. Essence can also mean just the most important thing. So either way you look at it, 18.65 and 66 are the most important instructions of Krishna as per Krishna himself, which he says in 18.64, that sarva guhyatayam bhuyah shrunu me paramam vachaha, that listen to my most confidential instructions. Sarva guhyatamam bhuyah, not guhyataram or not guhyam, but guhyatamam bhuyah, and shrunu me paramam vachaha, my most important instructions, you should listen to me now. So these are the most important instructions of Krishna, and those are manmanah bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evashyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. And Krishna is saying, if you do these things, manah bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, these four things if you do, then you will come to me. Mam evashyasi, you will come to me. Satyam te, there is no doubt about it. This is perfectly true thing. And because you are my very dear devotee, pratijane priyosime. And then he says, sarva dharman parityajya. Then we had a lot of discussion on parityajya, and when the reason is so that we can understand this verse. When Krishna says sarva dharman parityajya, what all to give up? What is the sarva dharman? And that is the study we are going through. People consider so many things to be their dharma. I must act with integrity. I must act with honesty. I must act with a mentality of non-doership. I must act like this, or I must be this person, that person. All this are one's dharma. This is my these are the principles that I hold dear in my life, and I will live my life by these principles, values, moral values, whatever values you can call it, philosophical values, even spiritual values. All those Krishna says, Parityajya, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, and what you should take up instead, Mam Ekam Sharanam. So take up my Sharan, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. And the result will be Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Moksheshyami. I will relieve you of all the sinful reactions, past, present, and future. Ma Shuchaha. So Moksheshyami, Ma Shuchaha. So I will give you moksha or release you from all these sinful reactions. Don't worry. Just do this. So the whole chapter is building up to that so that we can get an understanding of what all shelters we hold dear in our life. So first part of the chapter, Krishna is explaining the meaning of tyaga. Parityajya, there is the word tyaga there. And it must be very clear what is the meaning of tyaga, what is the meaning of giving up or renunciation. And we had a detailed discussion. The chapter starts with Arjuna asking a question about the difference between sannyasa and tyaga. And we talked about a lot about this last time, on the various meanings of sannyasa and tyaga, and how Krishna gives his unified meaning of tyaga and sannyasa, which is basically to perform action but without attachment either to the action or the result of action. So no attachment to either the action or the result of the action. That is true tyaga. And that he covered in text number 5 and 6. What is real and or actual renunciation? So yeah, only as a matter of duty. Then we came to text number 7, and that's where we left off. So text 7, 8, and 9 are talking about renunciation in the various modes. And we had covered renunciation in the mode of ignorance, where one gives up his prescribed duties. So prescribed duties are never to be given up. And we had a discussion about what is the meaning of prescribed duties as well. What are one's prescribed duties? So for that, you should know what is one's nature, what is one's inherent swabhava. And that is governed by our past conditioning, which is primarily in one of the three modes. Usually one of the three modes is dominant, but at any given time, at any given point in time, place, situation in our life, it could be a moving dial on the meter, so to say. So it's not very fixed, but generally we are in a given mode. In any case, we should identify our nature, which is being governed by our conditioning through the modes, and that tells us what our prescribed duties may be. And uh, performing those duties, uh, should never be given up. The attachment to the duty should be given up, and the attachment to the results of those works must be given up. But the duties are just our nature. They are our inherent swabhava, inherent nature, and they should not be given up. Of course, all of this discussion needs to be dovetailed into Krishna Bhakti. That is the most important lesson that it is building up towards. So we should dovetail all our activities towards Krishna, and that is what will come towards the end of the chapter in the most essential instructions. So we stopped there, and now we will make progress from text number 8 onwards. Okay, 1 second. I should have done this before. Okay, text number 8. So now this is renunciation in the mode of passion. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. So this is the duty in the or renunciation in the mode of passion. So uh, one should never give up prescribed duties as being troublesome, as being problematic, as causing bodily discomfort. In performing our prescribed duties of our nature or governed by our nature, there will always be some bodily discomfort, but our duty must be performed. We all know that, father has to go in the morning, work hard, come back for the livelihood of the family. That is father's duty. Mother's duty is to manage, let's say, I'm again not in the modern day concept, mother's work, father's, all that, but I'm just saying in general, mother takes a lot of there's bodily discomfort in raising the child. It's not an easy job. Just giving birth to the child itself is very uh, difficult task, and then raising a child is probably even more difficult. So there are duties, but these are all duties that need to be performed, and one should not give them up for bodily comfort. So our duties should be performed, and in the mode of passion, select the duties uh, which give bodily comfort, etc., and that is not to be done. Text 9. Now, renunciation in the mode of goodness. Now, this is the only place where Krishna goes in the reverse order: ignorance, passion, goodness. Everywhere he goes in goodness, passion, ignorance. Here he has a little bit changed the sequence. Anyway, so text number 9. O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So this is duty in the mode of goodness, or sorry, renunciation in the mode of goodness, and it is performed out of duty only, prescribed duty only because it ought to be done. That is a matter of duty, not because of any other reason, not because it gives bodily comfort or pleasure, sense gratification, or um, due to ignorance, due to any kind of illusion, none of those things. Simply as a matter of duty, it is to be done, and one is not attached to the work itself. So renounce the attachment to the work and renounce the attachment to the fruits of the work as well. But it does not mean one should renounce the commitment to the work. We will cover this a little later. Lord Krishna will say that the duty must be performed as a matter of duty, it says, right? Must be performed enthusiastically, with commitment, with determination. He will use those exact words: utsaha and dhriti. Dhriti means with determination. Utsah means enthusiasm. Duty sometimes gives this sense, okay, duty, अरे बाबा duty करने जा रहे हैं, तो duty बस duty कर दिया 8 to 5. So it doesn't mean like you do it completely with a half-hearted way. That is absolutely not the scenario. It must be done with full commitment, with enthusiasm, with determination. So all that is part of duty. And here also in the 9th verse, where it is about renunciation in the mode of goodness, Lord Krishna is saying, Niyatam kriyate Arjuna. So niyata karma, the niyata karma is the prescribed duty according to one's niyati, according to one's swabhav or nature, niyati. And that is also the nitya karma. Remember the discussion about kamya karma and nitya karma. So according to one's uh, varnashrama how you fit into the varnashrama system. Either you are a grihastha, or by most of us are 90% probably here are grihasthas. There are probably several brahmacharis as well, who will one day become a grihastha. They have not taken on brahmacharya as the lifetime ashram, but still. And then there may be people in their various varnas. Some may be interested in teaching others, or disseminating knowledge. They would be like naturally Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So all according to their nature and their qualities. They could be in various varnashrama, but for each one there is a particular karya according to their niyati, that is the niyata karma. So now we go to text number 10. So Krishna is continuing to describe renunciation and give more explanation about renunciation. Text 10 is talking about the quality of renunciation in the mode of goodness. So now he will obviously talk about mode of goodness itself, but because that is where we need to get towards. So, and he will show the contrast of mode of goodness versus others. So again, the goal is to get into the mode of goodness so that from there we can get into transcendence. Same example of going to the airport, take the flight. Text 10. The intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. So this is talking about the quality of the renunciate, the person who has renounced. So the quality of the person who is in the mode of goodness, who is the renunciate in the mode of goodness. So what are his qualities? The intelligent renouncer, he's called a Medhavi. If you see there, he is a Medhavi. Medhavi Chinna Sanshaya in the last part of the verse. The intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness. So what he does, neither hates inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, and has no doubts about work. So he knows that it must be done, and so he does it, even if it causes some discomfort. So this auspicious, inauspicious is at a material level, not at a spiritual level. So if one's duty is to, let's say, go clean the bathroom, okay, one may consider it inauspicious, but that's the duty, and he must do it. So he does it as a matter of duty, and one does it enthusiastically. So even if it causes discomfort or whatever, one should give up that and be not be attached to the work or the results of the work, but be committed to doing it. And when one is committed to the duty, then one goes into the mode of goodness, and from the mode of goodness one derives the one begins to elevate in the spiritual direction. So this all is one to, even if one is doing activities that may be discomforting or that may be in a particular mode which is not very comforting or pleasing, it is still causing spiritual progression. Okay. And any feeling of discomfort that is there at a bodily level, it is all coming due to past conditioning. The past conditioning is the one that is causing us to think, oh, this is uncomfortable, this is comfortable. Oh, everybody, wants to wake up late and, not do work. And all that is due to our past conditioning. We will see all those things, laziness, etc., is going to come up. So one must give that up. Okay. Then in text 11, we are moving quickly through this section. Let's see how far we can get. I want to cover majority of the chapter today. Now in text number 11, Krishna is saying, do not give up action. Just so that anybody is confused that, oh, Krishna is saying, give up the attachment to the work and to the results of work. Correct? So one must not think that it means give up. The best way is to just give up the work itself. Then na rahega baas. What is that? Na bajegi bansuri. So let's just give up the work itself. So there'll be no attachment to the work, and obviously the results itself will not be there, let alone the work. So we'll give up everything, and everything, life will be fine. I'll be acting according to Bhagavad Gita. No, then you will be acting against Bhagavad Gita. Because in text 11, Krishna says, do not give up work. And this he has said previously also in 3rd chapter, 5th chapter, you cannot give up work. So work must be performed enthusiastically. So only so that's why it becomes little hard, You have to perform work, but without the attachment. So text 11. It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities, but he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. So you have to perform the work. You can change the work that you need to perform. You can find the work that is more conducive to your nature. Maybe you have not realized your swabhava, which is where Guru comes in and helps to see where your real swabhava is and what will make you progress upward in the spiritual ladder. So you can change your work. That is very much possible. Just like a doctor says, change your diet. The doctor will never say stop eating completely. Of course, he may say that if you are like completely diseased, but that's a different situation. But he will always say change your diet, add this, remove this, da da da. But so the you can change your work, but you cannot stop work. So one must never think that tyaga or sannyasa is equal to giving up work. So again, you must do work, but without attachment to work and without attachment to the results of the work. Now Krishna will describe in text 12 the result of incorrect renunciation. What is incorrect renunciation and what is the result of incorrect renunciation? So text number 12. For one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. So what is the result of incorrect renunciation? Which means if you are attached to work or the results of work and you're doing it out of your attachment, then the results are, what are the results? The results are binding. And what is the binding? The binding is of three kinds: Anishtam, Ishtam, and Mishram. Those are the three Trividham Karmana Phalam. So what are the three? Anishtam means undesirable, Ishtam means desirable, and Mishram means mixed. So those are the three outcomes of the work that is done. Those are the three outcomes after death for work that is done, for renunciation that is done improperly. So Atyaginam, that is the word used by Lord Krishna. Bhavati atyaginam pretya. Pretya means after this life. So if you do atyaginam, which means you didn't renounce or didn't renounce properly, then you will get these three results. And after death means what? After death means, let's start with Ishtam. Ishtam means very desirable results, which means you did a lot of pious activities. You did a lot of good things in this life and you accumulated a lot of pious karma. Then the result after death will be heavenly planets like Swargaloka. That is Ishtam. And this has been described nicely by Baladev Vidyabhushan as well in his purport, as well as Srila Prabhupada. And Anishtam is undesirable or hellish. So when you go to, and both are binding, we all have discussed that many times. Hell, Swarga, Narka, Swarga, they are all binding. And Mishram is that you gain birth in the human form of life or a human-like. There are multiple human species, human-like species, not just one. So one of those species on the earthly planet, on the earthly level, that is Mishram. So in either of the Ishtam or Anishtam, hellish or heavenly, it is very difficult to make progress in spiritual life, because in heavenly planets there is too much pleasure, and in hellish planets there is too much pain. And this Mishram is pointing to the earthly planet. It has a good balance of pleasure and pain. So that is why it is called as Mishram. It is mixed. Both pleasure and pain are mixed. Just as an aside, these are the three outcomes when you don't do Tyaga properly. But just as an aside, I want to mention that That is the reason why human form of life is considered the best scenario for making spiritual progress, because it's not too pleasurable where you can completely forget God. There is a verse in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that for people who are too engrossed in materialistic pleasures of life, spiritual advancement is difficult. Why is that said? Because they're just too busy enjoying material life. And that is more so the case in heavenly planets. And there is no impetus to make spiritual progress. So, in the human form of life, still there are some, even those who may be materially advanced, materially very accomplished, or they have accumulated a lot of, material uh, property, not just in terms of money, but maybe good health, good body, good friends, whatever it may be. Still there are going to be some ailments or some miseries. One should take opportunity of those miseries, of those downturns in life, to think about God. Even in upturns also one should think about God, but it's a little bit easier to think about God when there are downturns. Dukh mein smiran sab kare, sukh mein kare na koi. So take opportunity. Sukh mein you must do sumiran, but definitely when some calamity or some misery arises, one must use that as an opportunity to turn towards God. And one can consider that that's the reason why Krishna brings some misery, so that there is that, you can turn towards him. Anyway, so that was just an aside. But the goal is to rise above all these three. None of these are good. That's what the main point of this verse is, because the tyaga was done in a improper way or not done at all. Then these three results occur, which means that all these three are undesirable. So you don't want any of these. The goal is to go above these to get liberated. Okay, so that is the end of the discussion on tyaga. So now Krishna has perfectly described what is tyaga, how to renounce, what is the meaning of renunciation, how to renounce work. And again, one should not consider renounce work as renounce work itself. Renounce attachment to work and renounce attachment to the results of work. So that part should be perfectly clear at this point. And those who perform tyaga properly, they attain jnana, and through the jnana they get liberated. This is the principle of Nishkama Karma Yoga. This is exactly what Nishkama Karma Yoga is. We had discussed this very, very early in the Bhagavad Gita. It's during our very early classes. Nishkama Karma Yoga, doing your work without attachment to work or the results of work. And that leads to one to become a jnani and get liberated from the material world. But as we know, all that is very difficult, especially for us in Kali Yuga. So the process is bhakti, which will come a little later in this chapter. So we will start the 13th part, but I just want to say a couple of more things. Lord Krishna in this chapter, till we reach the Bhakti Yoga part of it, and Krishna will insert or inject Bhakti Yoga aspects earlier as well in the chapter, but largely this whole chapter is dealing with the science of or the aspect of Nishkama Karma Yoga till almost let me share my screen. Chapter 18 is divided into largely two sections. Yeah, do you see this? Okay, this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, and this is the first slide I have. Did we see this slide last week? I can't remember. Maybe we did not. Okay. Are you able to hear me? Okay, good.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So up to verse 49 is a sort of a discussion about jnana, where Lord Krishna is going to describe in detail this whole philosophy of Nishkama Karma Yoga from a very deep, at a very deep level. But the main aspect of this whole chapter is Bhakti Yoga, which starts around verse number 50. Starts with the Brahman realization, then goes into Paramatma realization, and finally, as realizing that supreme absolute truth as Bhagwan Shri Krishna, and surrendering to him, Maam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. So that is where this whole thing is building up, and that is what this second section is about. And then he says, once you become a bhakta, what should you do? So that is the main aspect, but the rest of this chapter is describing in detail the philosophy of Nishkama Karma Yoga. So we must understand the details of the first part of this chapter, part A, which is 1 to 49, to see how we can dovetail this knowledge, what we are getting in the first 49 verses, into Bhakti Yoga. That should be the purpose. And that is the purpose of Krishna as well, so that we can realize what to give up, and also this whole understanding of how to apply it towards bhakti. Those who want to misunderstand Bhagavad Gita can just focus on the first 49 verses and take that as the sole conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. If they want to do that, let them do that. We have no problem with that. Krishna himself is saying, Shrinu me paramam vachaha. This is my most important instruction. We will see how to tie the first 49 verses towards that final instruction. So it's not like Krishna is wasting time for the devotees. For those who are in Bhakti Yoga, it's not that the first 49 verses are irrelevant and a waste of time. That is not the case. It is highly relevant to realize what all to give up and how to dovetail it towards bhakti. So please listen to this whole section that we are going to discuss in that mood, in that spirit. Okay. So I'm going to unshare at this point. So that's how you should understand this section. So now the next subsection in this whole discussion. So we had a discussion about sannyasa and tyaga. Okay, I'll share this again, and because I want to make a point. So so we discussed from 1 to 12. The next section is 13 to 17, which discusses the 5 factors of action. This is also important, pretty important. But again, we are still in the discussion of action and Nishkama Karma Yoga. So in this particular section, Krishna is describing the 5 factors of action. And this 5 factors of action can be largely described as 4 plus 1. 4 factors are in one major category, and then there is one 5th factor, which is God, Daivam. So that is the main emphasis, to understand that there are factors of action, something that cause action to occur. And we usually are good in seeing the 4 factors, but not the 5th one. And that is the main emphasis of showing us that there is this big 5th factor which we all miss. And no kind of education or any kind of our upbringing helps us to focus on that 5th factor. So that is the focus of this section. Focus on this 5th factor. And this is all given in the Vedanta itself, and that is what Krishna will say in text number 13. So that was a quick introduction to this whole subsection, 13 to 17, 5 verses, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 5 verses, Krishna will explain 5 factors of action, not in like one per verse, but 5 verses together. Number 13. O mighty armed Arjuna, according to Vedanta, Krishna uses the word Sankhya there. According to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn these from me. So this knowledge is as per Vedanta. It's highly philosophical. So don't expect to see a lot of bhakti injected into this, but we must understand how to dovetail, or how to see this from the eyes of a bhakta, of a Krishna bhakta, and I will explain that as we go along as well. So now next verse, number 14. So now Krishna is going to enumerate, list out the 5 factors of action. So what are these 5 factors of action? The place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavors, and ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. So what are the 5 factors? Again, the number 1 is adhishthanam. Adhishthanam is the body, the place of action. Okay, which means our body. Second is karta. Karta means the performer or the worker. Then karanam, not karanam. Karanam means senses. That's the Sanskrit for senses, various senses that we have. Then cheshta, which is endeavors, various kind of endeavors, the efforts that we do. And the 5th is daivam, which is the super soul or God. So these are the 5 factors that cause action to be performed. So what does this mean? What this means is that if you look at the first 4, the adhishthanam, karta, karanam, and cheshta, those are all belonging to us, right? Our body, I am the performer, I am the, which means I am the doer. Karanam, our senses. Cheshta, our endeavors, our efforts, our hard work. So just to break it down a little more, karta, cheshta, and senses, very important. If you see karta, the doer, okay, I am the doer. So we consider ourselves to be the doers. And this is very easy to see in all the good things that we do, all the accomplishments we made, right? You got a promotion. You say, God gave me promotion. Few people will say, it was all done by God. My portion was very little. No. Many people don't say that. Say, I did it. I put in so much hard work over the years. I made this project successful, that project successful, this, that. And so I got the promotion. I am the doer. So who is speaking there behind it? It is the ahankar. I did it. I am karta aham iti manyate. That is 3.27. Iti manyate means you consider, I did it. I am the doer. So that is the false ego mentality. So our false ego is coming. That's part of our body. It's our subtle body, false ego. Then comes cheshta. Cheshta means our endeavors. Where do our endeavors come from? What is endeavors? All our efforts. That is our endeavors. Efforts that we make. This did not succeed. Plan A failed. Now I have plan B. Oh, plan B did not succeed. Going to plan C. Who made all this planning? Who did all the planning? Huh? Who does planning in our body?
Mind.
Little different.
Buddhi.
Buddhi. Yes, intelligence. Intelligence does the planning. So we talked about ahankar. First, I did it. Then our planning. So I made the resolution. I have to do it. Man on moon in 10 years made a declaration. We will do this. That is like ahankar. We shall do this. How can the other country beat me? We must do this. That is ahankar. Then the whole team gets organized through the intelligence of NASA and this and that. All the minds put there together. They come up with all this grand plan. That is the intelligence. So these endeavors, cheshta is referring to our intelligence. And then the karanam, the senses, the actual senses. There are, how many senses there are in the body? Bhagavad Gita quiz.
5.
No.
10.
No.
6.
Huh?
6. 8.
No. This will be a Bhakti Shastri question, multiple choice.
10.
No.
38. 6.
15.
So you must know this. It's not about knowing a number. It's not a number thing. When you say how many senses are there in the body, this is a conceptual question because that means you're missing something very important.
17,
Okay.
maybe.
So there are 11.
7.
So okay, it's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
okay.
We'll mute. There are 11 senses. Okay, 11. What are those 11 senses? And how you must remember, again, it doesn't you don't need to remember the names of all the 11, but the 11 are divided into 3 categories. That's how you should remember. 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses, and the mind. So those of you who said 5 and 5, you were either referring to knowledge acquiring or working senses, and you forgot the mind. So mind is the most important sense. Okay, so we know the knowledge acquiring senses: eyes, ears, nose, and the working senses: hands, legs, and so on. So that's how it becomes 11. So 11 senses are there, but the mind is the most important out of these. So that is also a cause. So we saw our ahankar, our buddhi, and our mana or mind, they are all the factors. And we can very clearly see in our life that these are the factors that cause the action to be performed, isn't it? We have been taught that. We have been this has been ground into our whole consciousness that we have to do the work. We have to first make a resolution, that is our ahankar. Then we have to make the plans, and then we have to execute the plans. So that is the karta, cheshta, and the karanam. So all that is cause of the results that we get. That's why we get the result. What are we forgetting in this whole thing?
God.
God.
Super soul.
Exactly. The fifth one we usually forget. That's why I showed you in that slide, it is 4 plus 1. So we all consider these things, but we forget that God plays these also play a role. Okay. That's why Srila Prabhupada has repeated this old saying, God helps those who help themselves. So first you have to help yourself. So yes, your own effort is required. It's not like you can sit and twiddle thumbs and God will just come and help. For pure devotees, that may happen. Yes, true. But in the way Lord has set up this whole prakriti, this whole nature, you have to put in the effort, but God has to sanction. And that we forget. And that is the fifth factor. So that is very, very important. So we consider ourselves to be the immediate cause. Whatever happens, we consider ourselves to be. Remember, there are 3 levels of causation. We have discussed this at some point or the other. Immediate cause we consider to be what happens just immediately. Usually it is ourselves for good things and somebody else who we blame for the bad things. Sometimes we blame ourselves also for the bad things. If we are a little bit more advanced intellectually, then we can blame ourselves. Even when, like, for example, I talked about promotion. Oh yes, I did it. Or you came first in the class, or in your test. I did it, all my hard work. So that is easy to see. The hard one to see is when you fail. Let's say a thief, he got caught. So he got caught, he can either blame the police. Oh, if the police was not there, I would not have got caught. So he's blaming. So he can consider that as the immediate cause. Or sometimes if the thief is a little bit more advanced, he can think, I did not run fast enough. I could not outpace the police. Something like that, whatever. I could not hide myself better. So I got caught. So that is the immediate cause. But again, you're forgetting the higher cause. The higher cause is God. He sanctioned it. And therefore, rest of it is just a execution of how it actually happens, is just a execution. Krishna will, or God will, somehow engage or rearrange the prakriti or the things to happen in such a way that whatever he has sanctioned will happen. So very important to see God in our actions, or in the what causes the actions. We will discuss a little bit more on this in the next 2 verses, or in the 16th verse. So now let's proceed to verse number 15. 15. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused by these 5 factors. So, whatever right or wrong that you do, okay? So, right or wrong, as in from a what is called as nyayam or viparitam, opposite of nyaya. These are the scriptural laws, the laws that govern uh, our bodily affairs. So all the karma kandic laws, etc., that are given in the Vedas. What are the Vedic moral codes and so on? So all those are given in various scriptures, the Vedas, the Manu Samhita, and others. How to live a good materialistic life. So according to that, whatever actions that one does, whether they are right or wrong, it is performed, and whether you do it in your via your body, mind, or speech, these 5 factors are always the ones that affect these or cause these actions. They are always in play. All these 5 factors are in play. That's what's being said here. So text number 16. So this is talking about the doership mentality. What is the doership mentality? Therefore, so this is sort of, summarizing that therefore one who thinks himself the only doer, kevalam, Lord Krishna says, atmanam kevalam tuyah. So the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, and what Krishna really means is he's hinting at the 5th factor, daivam, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. Krishna calls them durmati. Durmati means of poor intelligence. Na sapashyati durmatihi. So that person cannot see properly and he is a durmati. He does not have very good intelligence. So one must be able to see all the 5 factors in the action. And as we said, it is very easy to see ourselves as the cause of the action, but very hard to see God in the picture. Now, why it is hard to see God in the picture? Because God is not directly present in front of us. That's what we think. If God came in front of us and he caused it and he played his role, and God appeared and said that don't do this, do this other thing, we would have said, God is saying, and therefore I didn't do, or I won't do it. But too bad, God is invisible. God didn't show himself to me. He's playing games with me. He's hiding, yet he wants me to believe that he exists. And therefore he wants me to believe what he says. How can I believe him? Let God come in front of me, then I will believe. All these arguments can be given. The first 4 are fairly clear because that is within one's body itself. Mind, intelligence, and false ego are within one's body. So very easy to identify within one's own body. You can introspect and you can find out, but God you cannot see. Now, Srila Prabhupada gives very convincing arguments against such, very convincing counter arguments against such arguments. Let us forget God for just a second. How many people do bad things even when they know they are blatantly bad? Clear warning is given on cigarette packets. I have seen cigarette packets. My father used to smoke cigarettes. So there used to be cigarette packets in our house sometimes. So I used to see, even this was in the 1980s, it used to be written, cigarette smoking is injurious to health. I'm sure it is written even now. And still people smoke. It would have been fine if the smoker said, oh, if you write on the packet, cigarette smoke is injurious, then I would not have smoken. Well, now it is written, but still you are smoking. The law says, very clearly the law says, don't drive above 65 miles. Still people are driving at 80, 90. And then when the police catches, then you say, okay, where is the speed, sign? Well, the sign is there on the road. So it is not a very good argument that I cannot see the law or I cannot see a particular thing and then I would have obeyed had I seen it. No, we know that from our material life itself, that is not a very good argument. So even if God comes and says, and we have seen this through Shastra, so many times we have seen through Shastra, that even when God comes and says, don't do this, the demoniac people still go ahead and do those bad things. Lord Krishna himself went to Duryodhan and said, don't fight the war. Hanumanji went to Ravan and said, Lord Ram, he didn't say Lord Ram is a powerful person. He said, Lord Ram is the supreme Godhead, supreme personality of Godhead. He didn't hide Lord Ram's identity. Still, Ravan didn't agree. And there are many, many examples in the scriptures which we can learn from, that even when God is present, it doesn't help. Just like the warning being present on the cigarette packet doesn't help the smokers to quit. So, and plus God has given so many scriptures, so many of his instructions through his, through his words, like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, all that contains instructions of Krishna. Plus he has sent his messengers, the acharyas, who are present in flesh and blood. Those we can see with our eyes, we can touch them, we can touch their feet. So it's not like God is not doing enough. He is giving us the warning. He is sending his messengers. Sometimes he personally comes as well. Still, we are not able to see the fifth factor. So we are just not programmed to see God in our lives. We should quit all these useless arguments that, oh, because we cannot see God, I cannot believe him. That is not a very intelligent argument. The problem is in our consciousness, our whole societal consciousness, not a personal consciousness, but in our whole upbringing, our education system, our moral values, our society, everything has become very godless. So in most areas, and it is becoming more and more and more godless and atheistic. So this fear of God, or this even the aspect of presence of God, let alone fear or love, we can leave that later. The presence of God itself has disappeared. And then when bad things happen, this is again a common question, why do bad things happen to good people and this and that? And then we attribute a lot of it to coincidence. Oh, coincidence happened, chance. Or when good things happen to other people whom we think it is bad. अरे वो कैसे फर्स्ट आ गया, उसको तो कुछ नहीं आता था. He didn't know anything, still he, I knew everything, still I didn't. So coincidence. Maybe he learned only those questions, nothing else he knew, and those questions came in the exam, so he came first, I couldn't come. I learned the whole subject. So coincidence, maybe he just, by fluke he got it. But the point is, coincidence is Krishna's way to stay anonymous. Krishna doesn't want to appear in front of all the other, normal such people who have no faith, because even if he appears, it's not going to change our mind. So Krishna, leaves us with his instructions and stays anonymous for a certain time and slowly builds faith through his instructions. So this whole coincidence is really the Daivam. Nothing happens by coincidence. This coincidence does not exist. Coincidence is simply our way of justifying what is Daivam. That is coincidence, whatever we call as coincidence. And that is the sanctioning cause. So we had the immediate cause, which is ourself. When we consider ourself or somebody else we blame, then is the sanctioning cause, which is Krishna. And the ultimate cause why Krishna is sanctioning, not because he is unfair. He is very fair and very neutral, except for his devotees, by the way. We'll keep that separate. But otherwise, he's fair and neutral. And he gives us what we deserve because of our past actions. And that is the ultimate cause. So that is that whole discussion on that who thinks of himself only as the doer is not very intelligent. One should see all the 5 factors, primarily God, as the factors in everything that happens. And not just these complicated things. Very simple things, very, very simple things like getting food on the table. You think you got food on the table? Huh? Because you worked hard, you have, $20, you go to the supermarket, buy bread, and you get it on the table. Sounds very simple. Even in the COVID situation, we saw how food disappeared from the stores. I'll just take one example, toilet paper. We all knew how much shortage of toilet paper. I think personally paid, I think $10 for 2 rolls of toilet paper. Can you imagine? $10 for 2 rolls or something like that. So food also was expensive. People were just hoarding, those who had money or whatever, those who whatever. So the point is that it should not be considered a slam dunk that yes, food will be available. If there is a drought or if there is a shortage, food can become so expensive that poor people may not be able to get food. And this all has been seen when the Texas hurricanes or whatever they came, in the most advanced country in the world, America, there was no electricity for weeks. So nothing should be considered as a given. If Krishna wants, in a small amount of time, the whole situation can be changed. So we must attribute everything that we are getting, food on the table, electricity in our homes, even our breath. Every breath that we are being allowed to take is by Krishna's permission. So we must see Krishna in action, or as a cause of our action in everything that happens. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Text number 17. One who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. So now Krishna is revealing the mentality of the non-doer. Non-doer means one who thinks that he is not the doer, one who abides by those principles, one who sees all those 5 factors, including God. What does he do? Or what is the mentality and what is the result? So what is the mentality? That though he kills, he does not kill. This is instruction to Arjuna, because he has to kill, he has to fight a war. That is what is going to happen. So Krishna is giving the example according to the listener. It doesn't mean that we get license to kill. What it means for us is that do your duty, but not thinking yourself as the only doer, but God as the sanctioner as well, whatever your duty is. But at the highest level, now how to apply this as bhakti yoga, this is very important. You see, at the highest level, your part becomes 0. You started with your part as 100%. I am the only doer. Who is God? I didn't hear about God. God doesn't exist. That is one end of the spectrum. Then you start knowing about God, and God keeps coming into the picture. At the other end of the spectrum, for pure devotees, God is the only doer. And one sees oneself simply as an instrument, only as a nimitta matra. That's what Lord Krishna says to Arjuna in 11.33. Nimitta matra bhavati, so Arjuna, just be an instrument, nothing else. Just like a truly like a knife. Does a knife kill or do anything bad? No, absolutely nothing. Knife is just sitting. It all depends on the user of the knife, how the knife gets used. It's purely an instrument, nothing else. If it is just sitting, it is just sitting. It cannot do any harm or anything else. So the essence of this verse is that one should consider oneself as a non-doer. One should not have any doership mentality or any false ego. One should not do that. And then the result is, what is the result? The result is na nibadhyate. So na hanti means one does not kill, but that's coming from the previous example, that one who doesn't consider himself to be the doer, even if he kills, does not kill. Na hanti, na nibadhyate, and he is not bound by the actions. In the previous verse, Krishna says, when you think you are the doer, then your actions result in 3 levels. You go either to hell, heaven, or Mishra. to the middle level, to the earthly level, which means you are bound. But if you consider yourself as the non-doer of action, then you are na nibadhyate. You are not bound at all by the actions or the results of the action. So this is the height of Nishkama Karma Yoga. When you do all actions as the pure consciousness of Nishkama Karma Yoga, that is what is being mentioned here. Now, who can tell me, according to Bhakti Yoga, what is the interpretation? How will you see this? This is not the instruction meant for devotees or Krishna Bhaktas. How will Krishna Bhaktas see this instruction? And with a reference to Bhagavad Gita, direct reference to Bhagavad Gita. And we have discussed this many times. So it should not be hard.
Attribute the results to the God.
Okay, and somehow it has to include the aspect of na nibadhyate, non-bindingness.
Surrender.
Sorry?
Surrender.
Surrender, yes, correct, but I'm looking for a Bhagavad Gita reference.
Unconditional surrender to the.
Unconditional surrender. Maybe my question is not formulated correctly, I feel. So anyhow, let me just share. I'm sorry. I'm sometimes I like to ask you questions and make sure it is interactive. So that was my hope, but I didn't formulate it correctly. But again, this verse is saying that one who is not considering himself the doer of action, he does not get bound by those actions. That is what Krishna is saying. But a bhakti yogi does actions. Well, in this case also, Krishna is saying do actions, but without attachment. But a bhakti yogi also does actions. And the clear reference to bhakti yoga comes in the famous verse 9.27, which is Yad karoshi, yad ashnashi, yad duhoshi, dadasi yad tapasyasi kaunteya, tad kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you eat, whatever you do, whatever charity you give, whatever tapasya you do it as an offering to me. So basically dovetailing all our actions. Yad karoshi, it's all about action. Yad juhoshi, yad dadasi, tapasyasi, these are all activities. So there's full of action, but tad kurushva mad arpanam, do it as a offering to me. So first of all, this verse is talking about action. And then the next verse, Krishna calls out, very next verse, 9.28, he says, what will be the result of that? The result will be Shubha or Shubha phalair evam. Evam means thus or therefore. So that evam is connecting it to the previous verse. That therefore, or like this, Shubha Ashubha phalair. Whatever Shubha or Ashubha phal comes out of it. Mokshyase karma bandhanaha. Karma bandhana, that binding that may have been there out of this action, mokshase, you will get moksha, or you will not be bound by that. You will be released from the karma bandhana. Sannyasa yoga yukta atma vimukto mam upaishyati. That in this way you should perform sannyasa. This is the bhakti yoga meaning. This is the true meaning Krishna is saying of sannyasa yoga yukta atma. Krishna is saying the same things here as well, minus the bhakti aspect. And that he will connect it later. So I just want to say that that is how, as a bhakti yogi, you need to understand this whole section. So, mam upaishyati, then you will come to me, Krishna says. Here, Krishna is saying you will get liberated. Fine. But there he is directly saying you will come to me. So, that is the understanding. Okay. I have some more notes, but we are getting late, so I'm going to move forward. Okay. Now we finished this section. This was verse number 17. We covered 17, right? Nor is he bound by his actions. So yes. So 13 to 17. So these 5 verses we covered, and that is talking about the 5 factors of action. And I hope I have communicated very clearly that one must consider God or Krishna as the sanctioner, as the one without whose sanction the action will never be successfully completed. And when one acts with that non-doership mentality, then one gets liberated. And as a Krishna Bhakta, one goes to Krishna. Okay. Now 18 to 40, that's a big section. Okay, 23 verses. And this big section starts with the first 2 verses, 18 and 19. So let's go into that. Then I will explain the essence of the whole section, 18 to 40. What's going on in this big section, 18 to 40. So again, this is a little philosophical section, but quite interesting. And Krishna is going into a more detailed analysis of Nishkama Karma Yoga in this 18 to 40. And let's go to 18. Okay, Manoj Prabhu, I think you said, may I ask a question? Yes, please.
Yes, Prabhuji. So one question, Prabhuji, you said if someone does any task with the understanding of non-doership, then he goes to Krishna. So
No, I didn't say that he goes to Krishna.
I mean, he gets liberated.
Yeah.
So
there is a Nishkama Karma Yoga aspect, then the Bhakti Yoga aspect.
Okay, so just for my understanding, Prabhuji, so if a thief, takes a knife and he attacks somebody and he says, okay, Krishna is asking me to do this and I attribute this, then how do you justify that?
No, first of all, he has to justify how Krishna is asking him to do this. Okay, Arjuna can justify that Krishna asked him to do this. Okay, but Krishna has nowhere in any of the scripture said that that is our duty. Krishna will say what our duties are. Our duties are mad manah, bhavamad bhakto, mad yaji, mam namaskuru. Those are our duties. Where does it say go kill someone else? So those are made up duties of the mind, and we will see that those duties are out of the scripture. Krishna will clearly say here what is karma, what is the karma in mode of goodness versus mode of ignorance. That is coming up right now, exactly for the kind of question you have asked. This is a perfect segue into this section. When reading this much, one could ask exactly the kind of question you asked. So actually, I don't know. And this was not a planted question, right? I didn't ask you to ask this question.
No. Yeah.
So this is exactly the reason why Krishna is going into the detail, so that one knows what is the sanctioned or the allowed actions and what are the actions which are mangadhant, which are made up, self-made. So one can say, oh, Krishna has asked me to shoot you. Boom, I shot you. Thank you very much. You will go to jail. Krishna has asked you to go to jail. So that's what the police will say. So, there is no such injunction like that. And one can follow their own mind, but the mind is corrupt in that case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes.
And that is why it is very important to understand Shastra. Okay, I remember 25 years ago, I saw some movie where it was the story of some murderer, and he said, Krishna has said, I am not the killer, or you are not the killer, or something. Or
exactly, Prabhuji, those lines.
Something like that. Therefore, I am not the killer. Why are you putting me in jail? Something like that. These are all nonsense arguments. So you cannot misuse Bhagavad. That is called half knowledge is a dangerous thing. So one must therefore invest his time. If you really want to understand Shastra and act according to Shastra, and then consider that how to kill somebody, okay, fine. Even if you want to kill somebody according to Shastra, first understand Shastra. And if you really understand Shastra, hopefully you will come to the understanding that nowhere it is mentioned how to kill. Just by half understanding, if you go do something, it's a dangerous thing. As they say, half knowledge is a dangerous thing. You are setting yourself up for trouble. Okay. So that's why detailed understanding of Shastra is good. And under the Guru, it becomes much easier. Just like again, I'll say Guru is like a doctor. If I tell you go understand all the medical science so that you can treat your cough and cold. It's not a very good ROI. Best thing is to pay $50 to the doctor. He has studied all the medical science, and you just go for 10 minutes instead of studying for 10 years. You can get the job done in 10 minutes. Okay, he will tell you what are your symptoms, and he will give you a prescription. You eat the medicine, be happy, go home, do your work. So similarly, you can go to Guru and say, I want to kill this person. Can I kill? Guru will say, have you gone crazy? Please don't do it. So then you can stop. He will tell, nowhere in the Shastra it is written like that. So first, of course, you must trust and have faith in the Guru and all that. But I'm just making a very simple point that deep, good understanding of Shastra and surrendering to Guru, we can get clear direction in our life. All these other things that, oh, Shastra says this and that, and therefore I must do this, I must do that, is very bogus. And you're making a more extreme point about killing, but so many people come with much simpler things. Oh, I should do this vrata and this vrata and this vrata. Monday I should do this, Tuesday I should do this, Wednesday I should do this, Thursday I should do this. Oh my God, this whole thing is so problematic. I give up everything. No, you pick one path and you go for it. So that's why trying to understand everything on your own may be problematic. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Okay, so 18 to 40 section is talking about a detailed analysis of Nishkama Karma Yoga. And there Krishna is trying to explain some details exactly to clarify these kind of doubts. So text 18, Krishna says knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower are the three factors that motivate action. Now 18 and 19 are very important verses. They are the sort of the index verses for a large part of the section that is coming up. So you must pay attention to these two verses. They are the index. So, and I will give an introduction to this section as well. So these are the three factors that motivate action. What are they? Jnanam, Gyayam, and Parigyata. Knowledge, object of knowledge, and knower. Then the senses, the work, and the doer are the three constituents of action. So which means, so let's dissect this a little bit. So action, this whole thing is about action. Nishkama Karma Yoga. So karma is this is all about action. So action has three motivators and three constituents. Motivators means what motivates you to take the action, to do the action. Okay. And what are the three motivators? Jnanam, which is knowledge, Gyayam, the object of knowledge, and Parigyata, the knower of knowledge. These are the three motivating factors. So it's like, if you want to find gold, okay, so what are the motivating factors? Gold is a motivating factor. Oh, I want gold. That's the motivating factor. Jnanam means knowledge. So the object of knowledge becomes, in this example, is gold. Jnanam is the knowledge, which means like a map. I'll show you a map. Okay, you go like this, like this, like this, and then you will find gold over there. That's the treasure pot. And Parigyata means the knower, which means who knows the map knower, or one who has faith in the map. That is the Parigyata. So one who has the faith in the knowledge to achieve the object of knowledge, that causes this whole thing, these three factors provide the motivation or the inspiration or the impetus for one to actually do the action. That is what Krishna is saying. So these are the three motivating factors to actually do the action. And what actually causes the action to physically occur in material terms is karma. Karanam, again, karma means the actual action. Karanam means the senses, and the karta, the doer, the one who actually follows the map. Okay, so these are the three constituents of action. And now Krishna will describe how these three modes, how the three modes affect the motivators and the constituents. So we have seen how action gets performed. It starts with motivation. Without motivation, there is some very little action. Actually, there is no action without motivation. There has to be some motivation. Even if you eat, the motivation is, oh, I'm feeling hungry, so I have to eat. The motivation is to subside our hunger. Or it could be, if you have a gulab jamun, even if you're not hungry, you may eat. But then the motivation is sense gratification. So there has to be some motivation to take an action. Okay. So Krishna has broken this down a little into 3 plus 3. And now in the next several verses, he will describe these in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Not all of them, but some of them. So text number 19. According to the 3 different modes of material nature, there are 3 kinds of knowledge, action, and performer of action. So he will describe these 3 things. First, jnanam, which is the 3 kinds of knowledge, action, which is karma, and karta. So among those 6 things, he's going to deal with these 3 things in the 3 modes. So, okay, so he will describe those things. So that was 18 and 19. Clear? Now, knowledge in the 3 modes. So now I want to share this slide, and I will let this slide be up there on the screen for a while. So I have put this into a particular, like a slide, because it's very systematically Krishna has dealt with it. Yeah. So here we see that these are the verse numbers in the table. So just focus on the table here. Don't focus on the second part of this. Don't focus on this part of the slide. Okay. We'll deal with it when we come to verse number 41. Right now we are dealing with up to 40. Am I sharing screen? Okay. So just focus on the table, this part of the slide. And here we talk about Krishna will talk about 3 things: knowledge, jnana, karma, and karta. And then he will talk later about buddhi, dhriti, and sukha. Okay. So first these 3, and these are the verse numbers: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So knowledge in goodness, then in passion, then ignorance. 22. 23, 24, 25 will be action in goodness, passion, and ignorance. 26, 27, 28 will be performer or karta in goodness, passion, and ignorance, like that. Okay, so we'll follow this sequence. So text number 20. So knowledge in 3 modes. That knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. So knowledge in the mode of goodness is to see that same spirit soul in everyone. That is the basic science of the soul, which Krishna covered right in the beginning in chapter 2. That the soul is there and the body is just like a covering. Like we wear clothes and take off change clothes, like that the soul changes bodies. So that is that knowledge of the soul. Quickly we will cover the other 2 as well, and then we will come and see. So one who has this knowledge, this is the jnana, this is the core jnana to understand according to the Vedanta. This is actually the subject matter, the core subject matter of Kathopanishad, which is one of the most celebrated Upanishads, the science of the soul. But that is such a small part of Bhagavad Gita. That's why the Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita is vastly more expansive. Bhagavad Gita goes deep into bhakti, whereas most of the Vedanta is limited to this knowledge level, to the jnana level. Okay, anyway, next verse, text 21. That knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So one who does not see that equality, that equanimity among all living entities, that they are all the same spirit soul, whether it is a cat, dog, mouse, rat, or human being, or Indra, or demigod, whatever, They are all the same spirit soul. One who does not see like that is in the mode of passion. And from our understanding at our more modern level, knowledge that produces any kind of speculative theories about living entities. Oh, there are many theories which say only humans have soul, animals don't have soul. Or it's more or less a wordplay. Oh, the animals have soul, but they don't have feelings, they don't have consciousness, whatnot. That all is not. It's all coming from mode of that whole knowledge. That jnanam is all in the mode of passion. And next verse 22, Krishna says, and that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all. What is that kind of work? All in all, which is for sense gratification. For most people, that's all I care. My own sense gratification. To hell with you. I don't care. As long as I get sense gratification, I am happy. So that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager. Meager means self-centered. Okay. So which is meager is said to be in the mode of ignorance or the mode of darkness. So this is that knowledge which only produces an impetus to gratify one's senses. Such knowledge is in the mode of ignorance. So today, most of the society is in the mode of ignorance by this in terms of the knowledge, jnanam. Most of the jnana is mode of ignorance according to this verse, because all it is teaching us is sense gratification. Some of the intellectuals are trying to see what are the living entities and all that, do that intellectual discussion. They are still in the mode of passion. Only those who are going a little bit deeper into scriptures, and not just Hindu scriptures, but some of the other religions also talk about soul in the even in the animals and so on, and all the other living entities. Now, whether there is reincarnation of the body for the soul or not, that is a next level subject matter. But for example, many other religions do talk about soul being present in the body of other species. So anyway, so it is coming into that's kind of coming closer towards the mode of goodness. And this has been very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 5.17, right? That is 5.17. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Swapakecha Panditaha Samadarshinaha. Which verse is that? Can you find? 5.17 or 5.13? Again, I should remember this, but 5.18. Okay. So what it says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini. So Shuni Chaiva Shwapakecha Panditaha Samadarshina. So Pandita sees Samadarshina, equal. Who all does it see as equal? Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini. A Brahmana, a cow, Hastini, elephant,
Dog
Shuni
eater.
Chaiva Shwapakecha, a dog, and one who eats a dog, who is even more fallen
Dog
than
eater.
the dog.
Dog eater.
All of them as Samadarshinaha. That is the person who has the real Vidya, who has the real knowledge. Vidya means knowledge, Jnana. So that is what is the description according to the Bhagavad Gita, to see same equality in all living beings. That is what is being said in verse number 20. Okay, that is the real Jnana, the science of the soul. Now, my question to you all is, how does a Bhakti Yogi understand this? What is Bhakti Yogi's understanding of this? That is very important question, actually.
I think Bhakti Yogi, he sees Paramatma in everyone, and becomes everybody's servant. We say, we're servant of the servant of the servant. So,
Very good. Very good. Very good. Anybody else?
We are parts and parcel of Krishna, so everyone is same. It's just the gross body that is different.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so those are the right answers. And let me share with you two very important verses, very important verses, which you should, these should be part of your verses to remember. And if they are not as part of my list, I will add them to our list. And this is where, Chaitanya Charitamrita is so important in our lives. Oh, it's already 5:30. Today is Gaur Purnima, the appearance day or the birthday of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the incarnation of Lord Krishna, who appeared in Kali Yuga, not at the boundary or the cusp of Dwapar and Kali Yuga, but in Kali Yuga as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yesterday in our Srimad Bhagavatam class, I spent about 45 minutes on this. So I will not be able to spend that much time. I request you to go and see that. We had a fairly detailed discussion on who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because many people know Krishna, but not many people know Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the incarnation of Krishna in the Kali Yuga. So anyway, today is his appearance day, his birthday. So anyway, Chaitanya Charitamrita has some very beautiful understanding of the instructions of Lord Krishna as given in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam for a bhakta. So one of those verses, and Madhya Lila has most of the crucial teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he was giving these teachings to his disciples. And these have been, by the way, this is something I had summarized yesterday. Srila Prabhupada summarized all the important teachings of Lord Chaitanya in a more compact book called Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada knew in Kali Yuga we are so busy that we won't be able to read these big volumes of books. That's why he gave us Krishna book, which is a summary study of 10th canto, just so that we can directly understand who is Krishna through the Krishna book without reading the whole Srimad Bhagavatam from canto 1. And by the time we reach canto 10, it might be like, our life may be over. So Srila Prabhupada didn't want to wait for that to happen. Similarly, Chaitanya Charitamrita is 9 volumes, but he gave us this small book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where he summarized all the teachings. Anyway, so we will go directly to Chaitanya Charitamrita. Much of it is in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are everywhere, but much of it in Madhya Lila. And here we will go to chapter number 20, which are instructions to Srila Sanatana Goswami. So chapter 20, as you can see, the title chapter is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs Sanatana Goswami. So we'll go to chapter 20 and verse number 108. Very auspicious number. 108. Am I sharing screen? Okay. And what does it say? The first line. Jivera Swarup Hoye Krishnera Nityadas. So Krishnera Tatashta Sakti Bheda Abheda Prakash. But the first line says Jivera Swarupa Hoye Krishnera Nityadas. So the eternal form Nityera Das, Krishnera Nityera Das. So the eternal form, Jivera Swarupa, the real identity, Swarupa means the real identity of all jivas, whether cat, dog, or human being, or anyone, is eternally a servant of Krishna. Krishnera Nityadas, to be an eternal servant of Krishna, and not servant like a paid employee or a slave. That's the material understanding that comes of the word servant. Das doesn't mean like a slave. Das means like a one like who's completely surrendered to Lord Krishna, who is willing to do anything for Lord Krishna. He's so much in love. And again, English language may not have all the right words, but he's just so much in Sharana. That's what generally translates into surrender. But he has taken complete Sharan of Krishna, and his eternal position is to serve Krishna. So this is one of the verses which I wanted to bring up. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. So it goes above that understanding that yes, all living entities are the same spirit soul. Not only they are the spirit soul, they are eternal servants in love to Krishna. That is the Bhakti Yoga understanding. So please keep this in mind. And then there is another very beautiful verse, which is in chapter 13. And this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructing a big crowd and praying in front of a crowd of devotees who are about to engage in kirtan, and he is glorifying the Supreme Lord. And this is verse number 80. And I'll just read the translation here. Naham vipro nacha nara patir napi vaishyo na shudro. I am not a brahmana. I am not a kshatriya. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu singing in front of Lord Jagannath. I am not a brahmana. I am not a kshatriya. I am not a vaishya. I am not a shudra. I am not a brahmachari, not a householder, vanaprastha, sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, who is the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. This last line is very, very important. Gopi bhratu pada kamalayor dasa dasa anudasa. So Gopi Bhratur means one who is the protector of the gopis. Pada Kamalayor. So who is the protector of the gopis? Krishna is the protector of the gopis. And Pada Kamalayor means the lotus feet. And Dasa Dasanudas. So the servant of the lotus feet of the protector of the gopis, which means the servant of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. And who is the jiva? What is Lord Chaitanya saying? I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of the protector of the gopis, which means I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Lord Krishna, or of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. So this is very, very, very important. Gopi bhratu pada kamalayor dasa dasa anudasa. So very important verse. You should remember this. So this is the Bhakti Yogi's understanding. Not only he sees everybody equally, but he sees everybody and foremost himself. Not like, oh, you are the servant of Krishna. No. I am the servant of Krishna. So please remember this. So that is the Bhakti Yoga understanding. Very good. Okay. So we saw Jnana in the three modes. Okay. Now we will see action in the three modes. And we also saw Jnana in the understanding of a Bhakti Yogi. Now action. What verse is that? 23. Okay. We'll make quicker progress on this. Action in the three modes. Again, we'll go in sequence. That action, so please remember this. Okay, and try to see, the goal here is to try to see in the mode of goodness. So mode of passion and ignorance, we will see what not to do. Okay, and for mode of goodness, definitely what to do and how to dovetail it to bhakti. That is what is there to keep in mind. I will repeat once again. Please remember this point, what I'm going to say. How to treat all these verses as a bhakti yoga, bhakti yogi. Whatever is given in mode of goodness, first of all, as a bhakti yogi, you have nothing to do with mode of passion or ignorance. That should not be part of your lifestyle. And even what is given in mode of goodness, how to dovetail it to Krishna. That is bhakti yogi's view of this verse. And for those who are practicing bhakti yogis like me, trying to become a bhakta, the passion and ignorance tell you what to avoid. Okay, so what to adopt and what to avoid, and within what to adopt, how to dovetail to Krishna. That is the goal of all these verses. So please, as I am going through it, look at it from that angle. That action which is regulated and which is performed without attachment, without love or hatred, and without desire for fruitive results is said to be in the mode of goodness. So regulated, performed without attachment, without love or hatred, without desire for fruitive results. Not so a Krishna Bhakta definitely wants results, but he wants spiritual results. What is the result he wants? Love of Krishna. And he does not perform without love or hatred. He performs with love, but with not a material love, with love for Krishna. So that is how you must understand. Okay. Not performed without attachment. He is attached, but he's attached to Krishna. And he is regulated. He performs not without regulation, but with regulation. Sadhana bhakti is all about regulated. And of course, there is higher level where it becomes unregulated. Raganuga bhakti, we will not go there. Text 24. I'm still sharing. Yeah. Text 24. So this is in mode of passion. Okay, action in mode of passion. But action performed with great effort, a lot of effort, by one seeking to gratify his desires. Okay, sense gratification. And enacted from a sense of false ego, ahankar, is called action in the mode of passion. Okay. 25. That action performed in illusion, moham, mohat, it will say, in disregard of scriptural injunctions. Disregard of scriptural injunctions, very important. So it says paurusham, self-sanctioned, made up. So whoever was asking that question, so self-sanctioned is not is in mode of ignorance, without concern for future bondage or for violence or distress caused to others. Directly Krishna is saying action which causes violence or distress to others is in mode of ignorance. So Krishna, at least that question, previous question which was asked, Krishna is directly saying don't do it. He is not sanctioning violence on anyone. Is that very clear? That action is in the mode of ignorance. Okay. Now we will go to performer, karta. 26. One who performs his duty without association with the modes of material nature. So this is in goodness. So no association with modes of nature, no goodness, passion, ignorance. Without false ego, with great determination and enthusiasm. This is what I have highlighted in my notes. So action not half-hearted, with determination, dhriti, it is said in the Sanskrit, and utsaha. So one must perform the action. The performer, this is talking about the performer, right? So performer should be enthusiastic about, he should not be attached to the action, but still he should perform it enthusiastically and with determination. And without wavering in success or failure, whether failure comes or success comes. So what does that mean for Bhakti Yogi? Bhakti Yogi means he should perform bhakti with enthusiasm, not like as a matter of duty. With enthusiasm, he should serve Krishna, and with determination as well. Not like aaj kiya, kal nahi kiya. There has to be determination, sankalpa. Very important for bhakti. Those who are, taking some, and have some one-on-one discussions or take some guidance, etc. We talk about consistency and sankalpa. Make some measure and say, this is my sankalpa. This is whatever little it may be, but make some sankalpa. So determination and enthusiasm, very important. Without wavering in success or failure. Oh, I have been chanting for 6 months. Nothing has happened. No change. Well, there is so much contamination accumulated over millions of lifetimes. 6 months, maybe too short. Still keep going without success. Maybe you didn't see success, or maybe success came and you missed it. Krishna knocked on your door slightly. Some good things happened. Some change happened, but you missed seeing it, maybe. Because Krishna is very fast in reciprocating. He doesn't want you to feel that it is waste. The bhakti that you are doing is waste. So he will reciprocate, but you also need to listen to his reciprocation. So even if you missed it, or even if it is, you didn't see the reciprocation, don't get wavered. Continue in your bhakti. So that is how Bhakti Yogi treats this verse. Where are we? I lost my page. So we are on performer and 27 in passion. Now we will discuss a karta or performer in mode of passion, which is number 27. Okay, here we are. The worker who is attached to the work, and the fruits of the work. Exactly opposite to what Krishna has been saying so far. Don't be attached to the work and the fruits of the work. So one who is attached to the work and the fruits of the Sanskrit is karma phala ragi, not karma phala tyagi, but karma phala ragi. Raga means attachment, right? Raga, we say vita raga bhaya krodha. Raga means attachment. So karma phala ragi, attached to the work and the fruits of the work, desiring to enjoy the fruits. Greedy, lubdha means greedy, always envious, impure, moved by joy and sorrow, always in duality, happy in joy when good things happen and sad when good things don't happen, is said to be in the mode of passion. 28. The worker who is always engaged in work against the injunctions of the scripture, who is materialistic, who is obstinate, cheating, and expert in insulting others, and who is lazy, morose, and procrastinating. This one applies to me, procrastinating, is said to be a worker in the mode of ignorance. So, very nice word, dirgha sutri. Dirgha sutri means take long time to do things. That is procrastination. So morose and procrastinating is said to be a worker in the mode of ignorance. So we can find ourselves in these verses and see how to improve, how to go to mode of goodness. Okay. So we covered till 18.28. So now in 18.29, Krishna will change the gear a little bit, and he will talk about some more aspects which ultimately lead to satisfaction or happiness. So then comes understanding and determination. So this we will cover in the next class, and I wanted to pause here and see are there any questions or any discussion, anything like that. So just to make sure, we stopped at 28 and we will resume at 29. If not, then I would, while you are thinking of any questions that may be there, my request is if some of you would like to share where you are in your journey, those who have been attending regularly or fairly regularly, I would say, let's say 75% or something like that, and are, have taken some practical measures to make progress in Bhakti Yoga, in Krishna Bhakti. Would you like to share some things, some obstacles, or any successes or obstacles with me that will help to see how this class has affected you? Anybody like that? Don't feel shy. Or you can, okay, couple of people are raising their hands, or not raising, I can see they're unmuting. Maybe you can raise your hand if you want. And actually, you know, I might want to stop the recording and then do that if that's what you're waiting for. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So before I do that, let me make, are there any, I just want to see raise of hands if you want to share, because then I will know how to manage the time. If there is nobody, then I can manage the time differently. If there are if there is someone, then I will, you know, keep few minutes for that. So there is one person. Anybody else? Okay, you have 20 seconds to raise your hand, just so I can manage the time. So I only see one. Somebody has two. Okay. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. So two people. So I'll keep maybe 3 minutes each. So maybe 6 or 7 minutes I will keep towards the end. So, okay, thank you. Please be on the call, and I think I remember your names. So I will call on you. Okay, you can mute yourself for now. So before we get into that, I wanted to just make a couple of announcements. So today, as I said, is the most wonderful festival of Gaura Purnima. It is the appearance day of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yesterday, we had a nice discussion on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Please, if you were not able to attend, you can go and look at the recording of that. And if you are living in, wherever you are living, this is one of the wonderful gifts of Srila Prabhupada. I know there are many people on this call who are joining from various places in the world, mostly from United States because of the time zone and all that. So please go and visit a temple just out of love, you know, not to put, you know, $1 in the donation box or anything like that. If you do that, that is nice, but out of love. So just go and take darshan of the Lord. Like, you know, you all want to celebrate your children's birthday and all that, your own birthday. Participate in Lord's birthday. This is the festival almost as, you know, we celebrate Janmashtami with great vigor because we know Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same Krishna who appeared as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Kali Yuga. So it is no different than Janmashtami. Those who live in Portland can come at the Hillsborough Temple. We are going to go there ourselves right after this class is over. So we will be there, you know, I don't know, if let's say this ends by 6:15 or something, we should be there around 7 o'clock, let's say. So till the end, we will be there. You can, you know, come there whenever you would like. Temple is open till 8 o'clock today. And Prasadam, to go Prasadam is also there. So that's an added incentive. But you can be inside only for a few minutes because of COVID restrictions and all. Yeah. Okay. Now, those of you that had ordered the Japa book, it has been shipped. It's on its way. I have the tracking number. It should be here in 1 or 2 days. And I can, maybe, you know, I'll email you all and let you know when it is there, and you can come and pick it up. And those who wanted me to mail it, I will mail it. Next thing is that, you know, we had also said last time, how can we help you? And there are many ways in which you can engage yourself to continue in your journey of Bhakti Yoga. This is very important. Don't let this opportunity or this whole investment that you have done in Bhagavad Gita and internalizing Bhakti Yoga, Krishna Bhakti, don't let it go waste. Engage yourself in some way or the other. If you want all those details of how to do, what to do, last week lecture, I spent a lot of time on all the possible ways and all. You can go look at that. I'm not going to repeat that whole part of the recording. Now, one thing that I have started doing, I want to show you this thing, is one second. Where is this? Okay. So this is the video of last class. I'm just showing you the. Okay, here it is. So what is I have started, or I want to do, and I have started doing is, give a lecture timeline. As you can see, this is the video of one of the classes. Oh, sharing. Can you see the screen now? So here, if you see a timeline of all the lectures. So at which point, so you can click on that place. Like if you want to see a discussion of where 18.5 is being discussed, you can just click there, and you can go directly to the place in the video where 18.5 is being discussed, or various other topics that we discuss along with as we go in the class. So you can click on that and get to that particular point. So it's like a minutes of the whole class that is there. So I found this kind of feature useful in some of the other videos that I watch and all that. Some technical videos also have this thing that at this point this topic is being discussed, at this point this topic is being discussed, and so on. So similarly, I feel this is helpful, so you can make use of this. But I have done this only for a couple of lectures. I plan to do this for all the other ones as well. So that brings me to the next point, that me and my wife can use some help from some of you. So if you would like to help us in some of these activities, that's one of the ways in which you can stay connected and also help in some small some way. Please let us know, and we'll be happy to use your help. So you can let me or my wife know if that is something you would like to do, and we'll be happy to engage you in that kind of work. Yeah, I'll share more about it after I stop the recording. Okay, so let me close all these windows. Okay, so then that brings us to the sharing, and then we will end with japa. So at this point, I will close the recording. We are not ending the class yet, but I'll just close the recording, and then we will continue with our discussion with sharing by the two devotees who raised their hands, and then follow up with japa. So thank you very much. We will continue next week from 8.29.